Many of you have been commenting and asking whether I personally have taken the COVID vaccine. In this video, I'm going to answer that question. Hi, I'm Dr. James Markham, and I want to thank you for allowing me to talk to you personally today. I just want to take some time to share my reasoning on why I have chosen not to get the COVID vaccine yet. I know many of you are struggling with this decision, and there's no black or white, there's lots of gray out there, but we have to look at the evidence. I'm going to talk to you about my personal decision. That might help you a little bit today. But before we do that, I want to turn you to a biblical prescription that I go to. You hear so much news out there. Where do you go for the truth? You know, you hear the internet, the media, they all have different things, and it's very confusing. But I've chosen as my true north the Bible. And there's biblical prescriptions that help guide us in all aspects of our lives, including our decisions. I want to share with you a scripture that's very meaningful to me from Psalms. Psalms 32, verse 8. It says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will guide you with my eye. So God has promised us, He's guaranteed us that He's going to be the one that instructs us and teaches us. And that's a wonderful promise to have. So when we make any decision about whether to take a vaccine, about whether to do something at work or whether to move, whatever we do, we should ask God. He's going to sort of lead us that way. Well, if you think about the history of COVID, you know, I'm a cardiologist and I've been treating the COVID now for well over a year. And when it started, you know, there's so much information out there. Remember the old days, you know, we predominantly talked about social distancing, washing hands. We talked about masks. Many were quarantined. In fact, we self-quarantined ourselves as medical professionals for a period of time just because we were scared that it would wipe out our whole group. We saw all the sick people in the hospital, and I can say to you, this infection is real. Well, in making my decision whether I should get the vaccine or not, I wanted to use evidence. And for a while, we haven't had the evidence because this was all so new to us. And there was really, as we've gone through this, there's 4 arms that we really need to look at in attacking not only this virus, but the viruses that are to come. And I've mentioned this before in other videos, but the first one is our own immune system. We want to make our own immune system as strong as we can do. And simple things like exercise, sleep, water, vitamin D, minerals, eating a healthy diet, being happy, less stress, all that makes our own immune system as strong as it can be to fight off any offenders, including the COVID virus. The next thing we needed to really focus on is early treatment. You know, if you're bleeding, you wouldn't go into quarantine for 10 days and bleed to death. If you had a bacterial infection, you'd get an antibiotic. Well, nowadays, if you have a COVID infection, I think you should be treated quickly. We have medications that can treat that right away. We shouldn't wait for long periods of time. Now, unfortunately, many have not been treated. And now we have this term called long haulers, people that are experiencing some of the symptoms of COVID long term. And I wonder if we would have got on it really quick, whether they would still be having this. The third thing we should treat aggressively is our own immunity. We've had a lot of focus on that with the vaccines. We have acquired immunity. We need immunity. What's acquired immunity? That's our own body's ability to fight it once it gets in us. And then lastly, we need to focus a lot of attention on risks. Who are the largest risk groups? We know that older people are higher risk groups. In a study from Europe, it says 65 are potentially high. I know that people in nursing homes or assisted living where they can't get outside, where their ventilation's not as good, they're higher risk. We need to identify who's at the highest risk and treat those people even more aggressively. So the 4 arms in COVID and any virus that we need to be addressing are your own immune system, attacking the virus quickly, knocking it down quickly. Third, our own acquired immunity. And fourth, identifying the groups that are at the highest risk so we can be even more aggressive in treating them. So in making my personal decision as time has gone on, I tried to enhance my immune system. And early on, I did everything I could to stay healthy. I wore my mask, I took vitamin D, I ate a healthy diet, I exercised, I tried to get enough sleep. I ended up not ever having symptoms, so I didn't have to have the second arm. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the acquired immunity. And then lastly, I was in a fairly higher risk group because I was a healthcare professional. And believe it or not, I'm a little bit older than the average cardiologist now. But in making my decision, I looked at some evidence, and I wanted evidence, and we're acquiring evidence as we've gone on through this pandemic, and we're learning more. But in the British journal, The Lancet, just recently, April of 2021, The Lancet studied immunity, acquired immunity, and reinfection. So what they did in this study is they looked at lots of healthcare workers like me, and they studied them from June of last year till December. And actually, they studied over 25,000 healthcare workers. And they showed in this study that if you had a previous COVID infection, you had an 84% lower risk of developing another infection. And that protection seemed to last up to 7 months. That data is better than some of the other data that we have on different types of immunity. And we talk about acquired immunity. That's what we get from getting it ourselves. But we also can get some type of acquired immunity from vaccines too. Okay, that's another way to get it. But in these people that had no vaccines, that just were exposed, they had an 84% lower risk of getting affected again, up to 7 months of protection. Now, even before that, in February, in the journal Science in Immunologic Memory, well, they looked at this study in February 2021, and they showed that immune memory of those that had this had a greater than 90% immune memory for these T cells for greater than 5 months. And these are all people that had the virus. They didn't get treated with a vaccine, but their T cells, they had an immune response, and the memory was greater for 90% of people for greater than 5 months. And this helped me make my decision. Another study from years ago that helped me through all this and making a good decision for me was from Antiviral Research. And what they looked at is they looked at another T cell immunity of the SARS and MERS. Now, these are types of similar coronaviruses. Remember, years ago, we had the SARS and we had the MERS viruses. And they looked at people 12 years after they've had this virus. And they still, after 12 years, had T cell memory. That means they had some type of immunologic response when they saw this virus. So that suggested to me, in thinking about what I should do, that maybe if I had immunity, maybe I had that third arm that was really helping me out. I couldn't really do anything about my risk factors. Of course, I was working on my immune system. If I would have had symptoms, I would have wanted to treat it very positively with some of the medicines out there. But now I'm looking at the third arm. And remember, I think each of these arms are very important. Even though the focus might be on one more than another, they're all important because we're going to have this problem again down the road. We just don't want to focus on one arm. We want to focus on everything we can to beat any virus. So about this time, the vaccine was coming around, and I'd really never been sick, but I knew I'd been exposed. And this virus, I consider it sort of like pollen in the air. You get a little bit of pollen, you don't start coughing and you make an immune response. But you get a lot of pollen, you could get sick depending on your underlying immune system. Remember, I was working hard to keep my immune system healthy. I ended up being exposed to it, even though I didn't get really sick. So in December, in making this decision, I tested my body. Even though I'd never been sick, I tested it to see if I'd been exposed to it and see if I had any antibody response. So on December 23rd, I tested myself, and here's the results here. And the SARS-CoV antibody was positive. So that means I've had the antibody to that SARS. So I've had an immune response. That third arm in me was working. So I was very happy about that. So I decided at that point, since I already had antibodies, to the entire virus. Remember, the vaccine really is good at making just antibodies to the spike protein. Remember, it's just one antibody that it's making, whereas I was exposed to the whole virus. So I probably had antibodies to more than just that spike protein. So in making my decision, I said, well, I'm going to hold off for a while and still focus on these other arms very diligently, being careful not to acquire much of the titer, being careful to watch my immune system. And I was very impressed about the importance of vitamin D. Many people in the hospital that got really sick had problems with vitamin D. And some of the research has shown that vitamin D helps prevent that cytokine storm that made people so sick. So I've sort of kept an eye on things, done as much research, looked at research from all over the world now, not just one area, tried to take a balanced approach, and then pray about it and ask God to help me and teach me and to share what's needed with everybody of what I've learned. And remember, a lot of people, as you've read some of the comments, they're not too happy with me telling what's out there. But I felt in my heart that I had to share what I've learned to help you. I'm not telling you what to do, but I want to tell you to think about it. Ask God to help you because He's the real healer. He's the big picture. And in the end, we want to have Him in our heart because we have that. We have everything. And He's going to guide us. Remember that text, in all ways acknowledge Him and He will direct your path. So I kept praying, reading, trying to stay healthy, working on all these 4 arms, praying that my other colleagues would also take each of these arms very seriously, put research and money into these. And then I decided I'm going to test myself again. I had myself and my wife tested as well because she was exposed to me. And we went on April the 14th and she had her IgG antibody was positive. Her level was 14 and my level was whoppingly high at 124. So over the months, either I've developed a stronger immune response or I've been exposed to some degree and developed even more immunoglobulins, antibodies to fight this. So with that, I was still very interested in all of the science. So we go back to that study. This talks about the antibody response, but what about the T cells, the long-term memory that we get when we've exposed to something? We see that some of the coronaviruses, we could have some type of T cell memory for years. We saw in that other study that they had it for quite a long time too. So now they've developed this new thing that's been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. It's called T-Detect COVID, where it detects if you've had long-term adaptive or acquired memory. So it's a send-off because it's not everywhere, but I'm predicting in the future it will be. So I sent mine off just recently, and I hope soon to tell you what my long-term immunity will be. But I'll tell you, with this high level of IgG antibody, I'm pretty sure this is going to be high. And now I'm going to test myself regularly over long periods of time to see if I have long-term immunity. Now, if I were in a high-risk group, if I did not have immunity, would I take the vaccine? Okay, well, that's a whole new subject. But at that point, based on my exposures, if I didn't have any immune system at all, I would look at the risk and benefits. I would see what I'm doing with the other arms. I would look at, am I being as healthy as I can? Am I in a high risk group? Is there great treatment to treat it if I got sick with it? And then I would decide if the vaccine was right for me. And it's all about risk and benefits. Remember, the vaccine has some risk. Everything that we put in our body has risk benefits. But also, if you're a high-risk group, the risk of COVID is big as well. So I don't think it's a poor decision to get the vaccine if that's where God is leading you. But in some people that are doing all these other arms, acquired adaptive immunity, you might not benefit as much. Which brings me back to Psalms 32:8 again. It says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. So as we stay close to God and walk with Him, I want you to look at the big picture again. And that's the big picture is that we have a God that loves us. He gave us His Son. And in his Son, we can be reconciled to him. He is a place where he's going to heal us forever. When we walk with him, he's going to instruct us in these decisions. We can make good decisions. And I want us to focus on the big picture and let you know that God's going to take care of you in the long run. Now, if you're seeking clarity on God's leading through these confusing times, I want to invite you to sign up for our newsletter. You can find the sign up in the description below. If you like today's video, be sure you click the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of our future content. And I want to thank you personally for trusting me and allowing me to come into your life. But remember, it's nothing that I do. I'm just praying that the Holy Spirit guides these words and help it mean something to you so you can have that relationship that will take you through the hardest of times. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll chat again soon about more biblical prescriptions for life.